The Manticore was a magnificent ship, but she was not an easy one to run. It had been designed for a galleon, and a galleon of her size and shape, with 3 full decks, was by far the biggest ship that could be made seaworthy in the then state of shipbuilding. The Manticore had 130 feet of keel, 125 feet of beam, and a hold of 20 feet. She was a big ship, and she was built to take up her weight. She would ride high on the sea. She would stand a pitch and roll of any sort of weather. 100 years ago, her type was the type of the great ships which carried the fleets of England to the defeat of the Spanish Armada. In her day, she was the biggest vessel in all the world, save only the galleons of Spain. But she had never been intended for the business of privateering, and her speed had not been designed for such work. She could do 18 knots with wind and tide, and at the pace she could outsail anything less than the biggest man-o'-war, but she was too ponderous to catch a man-o'-war if it put its helm down. Her main deck guns were 12-pounders, but her 6 smaller decks had only 2-pounders, and her broadside, for all its weight, was a trifle smaller than that of the gunboats which had attacked her. It was not so much a question of speed as it was of power. The power to get up to speed. She could be driven up to 15 knots, but her top speed under sail was about 10 knots. She had no stern walk or rudder. Her rudder was fixed and could not be moved to right or left. It had to be swung up out of the way in order to give her steerage way, and when swung down again there was no way of controlling her except through the wheel itself, which was fitted with a number of flanges and lugs. She had not been designed for a privateer, and for privateers she would have been excellent. However, as they drew nearer and the shoreline came into view, it became obvious that she would serve their turn, though in a very odd way. The seas that ran in from the north would have been the death of the little ship if the wind had been any stronger, and now the wind was not strong enough to blow her away. But the seas would still make a wreck of her. As they drew in closer to the land, a whole string of low hills came into view, covered with thick forests of trees, mostly pines, and the captain told them that the trees were what they were most afraid of. These forests extended right down to the water's edge, and he warned them against attempting to run between them and the shore. If you do that, you're like as not to lose your mast or your sails, he said. They'd be torn to shreds against those trees. Well, that's good, said Roger. If we can't run between, we'll stay over on the other side. Not if you don't want to break up, said Captain John. I don't know why you're so set on this. I don't see why you think it's such a grand idea to be fighting with those cutthroat Frenchmen. It's just because we don't want to fight them that we want to take a prize, said Jamie. He had been listening to this exchange with some amusement. He laughed now, and leaned back against the rail, arms crossed. You've got a point there, though, he said to Captain John. It wouldn't do for us to lose our masts either. Captain John eyed Jamie narrowly, but then returned his attention to his glass, which he held fixed on the coast. The wind had freshened a little with sunset, but not enough to make much difference. As darkness fell, they hove to for the night, as sailormen's term meaning, came to anchor. Jamie was glad of a rest. In the weeks since his escape from the prison hulk, he had kept as close as he could to the ship's company. But the company was small. His duties kept him constantly on deck, where he would be noticed by curious seamen and speak to them. At night, though, he could be alone, invisible in his dark cloak, standing at the rail with a hand on the halyard, looking at nothing. He had no particular fear of recapture, while the privateersman was still in ignorance of who he was, and therefore presumably thought him a harmless passenger. He would not be in danger of being recognized, but he knew that they must be looking for him, and though they could not know precisely where he had gone ashore, he did not want to be brought back on board again if it could possibly be avoided. And there was still the problem of finding a ship bound for the colonies, one that might be persuaded to take him as a passenger. That would require money. He had none to pay for his passage, and while he had the gold watch on his person, it was no use to him until he could change it for a continental money, nor even then unless he should meet with someone who spoke English and who would accept an American dollar's currency. He had been obliged to leave his money with Joseph Wemyss, and even if he should find some means of communicating with him now, there was no chance that Joseph would have any money on hand. He sighed and put away thoughts of escape. His place was here with Claire and the children, not running madly about the world trying to save his own skin. And yet, how much simpler it would be if only he could get away. The ship rolled gently, her timbers creaking. The night wind blew cold through his shirt. The moon rose, full and yellow as a ripe lemon. No one spoke above the small noise of waves and wind. No one moved but Captain John and one of the hands at the wheel. He had given the other man leave to go below, as a reward for good work in bringing the ship through the shoals. It wouldn't do for a man to be tired at the helm in such weather. Roger was leaning against the rail beside him. He heard the boy draw a deep breath and let it out slowly in sleep. "Now," said Jamie, quietly. No, it willna do it. He spoke in Gaelic. He hadn't wanted Roger to hear. What? Who? Roger sat up abruptly, wide awake at once. Do what? Take me back. I won't go back. Roger looked at him in incomprehension. But why not? I've said so. Roger looked out to sea for a long moment before replying. But you can't stay here, he said at last. They need you. Your family does. No. Yes, they do. No. He hadn't meant to sound so abrupt. He regretted it, but didn't know how to soften his refusal. It was wrong. He knew that. He ought not to leave Claire and the children alone to face whatever dangers might come from the war. But he was right to refuse, and he couldn't help knowing it. Why? Roger asked stubbornly. You have done your share, more than your share. You saved my life. I would have done it for anyone, Jamie said, interrupting him. And it is not only for myself that I will not go back. What do you mean by that? Roger turned to look at him. The moon glimmered on his brows and made his eyes seem as dark as holes burnt in a mask. Jamie took a deep breath. I ken what it means to leave someone you love, he said. I did it once, I canna do it again. Roger stared at him in silence, but didn't reply. The ship rocked gently against the long swell. He could hear Roger's heart beating in his chest. He had left Brianna in France, knowing that if he went back to Scotland without her, he would never have the courage to leave again. He hadn't known what he might find in Scotland, and he had been afraid that she might not be there when he did return. But she had been there. She had forgiven him, and she would never have forgiven him if he had not come back. The same thing was true for Claire. She had made him swear to leave her, before he could tell her why he had to go. She knew why he had left. She had followed him from Hartsmuir to do what he asked her not to do, to hunt for Bonnet. She had found him and been forced to kill him in order to save him from hanging, and him from being hanged by Jamie Fraser. She had sworn never to ask what he might have felt at that moment, never to ask him anything about himself, and he had left her with that oath still unbroken. But she knew, she must know, what lay beneath it. And I swore that I would not do that thing again, if there is a time. And it may be there is not, but if there is, I cannot take it on again. Roger's hand squeezed his shoulder in wordless sympathy, but didn't pull away. Do you want me to go with ye? Roger asked quietly. He might need help. Ye a fool, but I dinna think ye a daft either, Jamie answered frankly, and I would like nothing better than to have your company. Roger smiled at that and put out a hand, patting his shoulder. Well then, he said softly, it's a promise then.